Welcome back to Dungeons & Dragons Homebrew Builds, the series where I'll be constructing classes, weapons, races, and more based on characters and items from your favorite anime, comics, TV shows, and video games. It's been a while since the last Homebrew Builds video, about 6 months actually, but as the second core of the Thousand Year Blood War arc of the Bleach anime came and went, and with core 3 around the corner, I've decided that, in order to get to some of the other Homebrew builds I've wanted to do videos for and take a break from the Bleach monopoly, as well as catch up on all the subclasses I wanted to release for Core 2 and 3, for this video, I'll be releasing 18 new subclasses for the Soul Reaper and Sternritter classes, and not only will I link them all in the normal XML format, but within an accompanying PDF as well, since a PDF version has been requested quite a few times before. After these subclasses and the next video, I'll be resuming the voter polls for Homebrew build videos, so be sure to vote on that, but as for this video, let's get to the subclasses. So if you don't have my Soul Reaper and Sternritter classes for D&D, you won't be able to use these, so be sure to grab those from prior videos or the Google Drive if you haven't already. Today we'll be covering the following Soul Reaper and Sternritter class variants with the following subclasses. Evolutions with a Mayuri Kurosuchi subclass, Nemu Kurosuchi subclass, and Toshiro Hitsugaya zombie subclass, Founders with Ichibe Hyosube, Oh-Etsu Nemaya, and Orihime Inoue subclasses, Quintessence with subclasses for Tenjiro Kirenji, Kiryu Hikifune, and Senjumaru Shutara, Sternritter variant class The Sternritter with Askin Naklevar, Bambietta Basterbine, and Candace Catnip, Separations with Uryu Ishida, who I don't have, Jugrim Hashwolf, who I never use for PvP, and Bazard Black, or Bazby, and finally a variant class for both Soul Reaper and Sternritter called Lifelong Desire, with the Soul Reaper variant class only featuring a subclass for Nanao Issei, our first primarily Hado user, and for the Sternritters, 2 subclasses for Gremi Thamu and Lile Baro. That's a combined total of 18 subclasses, so let's get into things starting with Soul Reaper Evolutions. First, for your first level soul trait feature, anyone choosing the Mayuri subclass will get a special Zanpakuto weapon attack 1-round cooldown reduction, and a 16% damage boost while you're at full health at 20th level, whereas Nemus also get a 1-round cooldown reduction, but their damage boost at 20th level is contingent on their target not being afflicted with any ailments, negative effects, or conditions, so not great synergy with anyone who focuses more on inflicting conditions than anything else. Toshiros also get the 1-round cooldown reduction, but get a 20% damage buff at full health at 20th level instead of Mayuri's 16%, something to consider before locking in your subclass for 7th level. At 6th level, Nemu gets 3 flash steps per bonus action, covering potentially 90 feet without even using any movement, and Mayuri gets 3 as well on account of his Hiren Kyaku shoes. But Toshiro, though having that 20% boost with his 20th level soul trait, only gets 2 flash steps. So also consider how important mobility is to you before deciding. Now on to the first major addition for each subclass, their special attacks. For Mayuri with Ashisogi Jizo, like the actual character, you get a good mix of his Zanpakuto powers, his modifications, and his tools. Also, finding out what his special attacks were in reference to was as fun as always for these builds. Your regular default attack is going to be a ranged tool attack, where you can attack by throwing that goo that Mayuri threw at Pernida when it charged him that burned it. It's only got a 5-foot range, so not fabulous for a ranged attack, but the spread is 15 feet, so it's like a mini cone spell attack kinda. Potential downside though is that it does the highly resisted acid damage, so a lot of potential for half damage pretty often. Next is your first special Zanpakuto weapon attack, where you attack in a radius around you with Ashisogi's Scream, and then do a thrusting dash stab. The Scream does a bit of thunder damage, which is great since it's not a commonly resisted damage type, but the dash does piercing, and you have to move 30 feet. Eventually that piercing will become magical due to a base class feature, and the dash doesn't invoke an attack of opportunity. They're never supposed to, even if I sometimes forget to include that. But being forced to move exactly 30 feet, no more no less, may call for this move to be more tactically used, perhaps as to avoid dashing off of a cliff, or made to be saved as a means to escape being flanked or surrounded. For your second special attack, you literally just set off a minefield in a 400-foot long line in front of you, so ridiculous range, but bludgeoning damage. Also, none of these attacks for any variant class or subclass can ever harm a friendly creature, again, even if I forgot to actually write that. Finally, you get the cool electric field Mayuri generated when Pernida again tried to rush him down, and it has a radius of 100 feet around you and does lightning damage naturally. Also, it's worth noting that all of these attacks can paralyze a creature if they take any damage due to Mayuri's nerve agent. They have to save against your Reishi save found in the Blood Warfare archetype feature or be paralyzed for a round. So that's extremely helpful, especially at 7th level, as you basically have infinite paralysis potential. Prepare to run into pretty much only monsters immune to paralysis with this class. With Nemu and her Nemuri Nanago feature, you get a 10-foot dash that deals bludgeoning damage, so commonly resisted damage in only 10 feet, but a shorter dash with more manageable range. You also get a 400-foot long line of bludgeoning damage as you smash the ground, sending out a wave of rubble, earth, and kinetic energy, and you get a 120-foot radius blitzing attack that also deals bludgeoning damage. This is the Unga Bunga bludgeoning damage subclass, and it gets no conditions or anything like that, but if the damage type and range numbers don't strike you, just wait for the ultimate attack at 14th level. For Zombie Tosh, you get Hyorin Maru, which has a chance to freeze with all attacks, a condition similar to paralysis, except for your special attack 2, which weakens instead, reducing the damage the target deals for a round to 1, something that can be incredibly useful in niche situations. You also get a 10-foot cold damage dash, so less resisted damage type and a more manageable dash distance, a 15-foot dash with slashing damage, so a more commonly resisted damage type but a middleman between the short dash and the uber long one, and the weakening condition, and you get a 50 by 50 ice wave attack, so not the massive AoE that the third special attack usually is, but still good range, still cold damage, and that's potential to freeze. For brevity's sake, I'll go ahead and rattle off what skills they get lightning round style up to 20th level, and then we'll double back around to 14th level for the ultimate attacks. So at 9th level, everyone gets a 20% Berserker, which boosts the damage of their special attacks by, you guessed it, 20%. Way down at 15th level, everyone gets a 20% Bruiser, boosting their normal attacks damage by 20% as well. 17th level is where things start splitting up and getting interesting, as Mayuri gets complete status immunity, giving him immunity to all status conditions, ailments, and effects, save for prone. Nemu gets Devastation, boosting the power of your ultimate attacks by a whopping 40%, and Toshi gets Debilitator, making all of the conditions he inflicts, so the freezing condition and the weakening condition, last 1 round longer. At 18th level, Mayuri gets Debilitator, allowing for his paralysis to last a round longer, Nemu gains immunity to the freeze condition and any negative effect from being cold, and Toshiro gets a 40% devastation himself. Finally, at 20th level, everyone gets 3 skills. Mayuri finally gets his 40% devastation, he gets Frenzy, which doubles his special attack damage, and he gets Weakened Defense, which causes his ultimate attack to reduce the target's AC by 5 for a round. All skills incredibly useful for boosting damage and supporting allies by making enemies easier to hit. Nemu also gets Frenzy, she gets Havoc, which increases the range of her special attacks by 20%, and then she has the range of her normal attacks extended by 20% as well with Long Reach, so a little more damage and a lot more range. Last but not least, Toshiro also gets Frenzy and Long Reach, but he also gets Poise, giving him immunity to the stun and prone condition, and making it impossible to move him against his will. All in all, I'd say the Mayuri subclass won here, but if you want coverage, I'd consider Nemu, and if you want freeze and weaken, Toshi's your man. We're not done yet though, since these guys all have Resurrection, so more skills at 20th level. Mayuri also gets a bit of a range boost with a 20% Havoc, but he also solidifies himself as a good damage dealing subclass along with having good internal synergy with a 30% damage boost against paralyzed enemies. Nemu's more angled around being basically immortal since, on top of her ultimate attack that we'll discuss in a bit, she has a 40% damage boost when she only has a quarter or less of her health left, and, once per long rest, if she dies, not only does she just not die, she gains the benefits of a long rest. So you definitely want a Nemu subclass Soul Reaper as a frontline DPS. Like Mayuri, Toshiro gets a 20% Havoc for some range, but he also gets a massive 50% damage boost for a round when he inflicts a status ailment on a creature. So Mayuri's good for inflicting conditions and not being inflicted himself, Nemu's immortal, and Toshi's the damage dealer. With those done, let's jump back to 14th level and take a look at those ultimate attacks. For Mayuri, he gets his Bankai, Matai Fuiken Shotai.
Bankai! ようやく臨月だよ。金色がしそぎ地蔵。Matai Fuiken Shotai!
Which has a radius of 400 feet, deals thunder damage, and guarantees a 2-round paralysis. So like every ultimate attack, good effect and fantastic damage, but it has limited uses. Though in this case, there's also good synergy with the skills. With Nemu's Gikon Jirinji, not only do you have radiant damage in a 400-foot radius, solving that only bludgeoning damage problem from before, and giving us a not commonly resisted damage type to attack with, but all friendly creatures in range, including you, get last-ditch survival as well, allowing you to avoid death once and get the long rest bennies. That means that Nemu can get her 25% health or less boost, potentially die and use her once per long rest last-ditch survival, use Gikon, quarter health damage boost again, res, use Gikon, quarter health damage boost again, res, and repeat that 2 more times. What an unstoppable monster, even at 14th level without her personal last-ditch survival, since Gikon is almost guaranteed to be a full team res. Unless there's some weird reason for a party member or members to be over 400 feet away from you during a combat encounter. Finishing off evolutions, Toshiro gets Daigira and Hyorin Maru. Which has the same damage in a 400-foot range like all the other ultimate attacks, as well as his commonly used cold damage, so more of a basic finish here, but he's a very substance over style subclass like that. Moving on to the Founder's Soul Reaper class, our first batch introducing Squad 0 members. And oh hey look, Orihime's here too for some reason. So for this variant class, our subclasses are going to be the captain of Squad 0 Ichibe Hyosube, the man who named everything, the god of Zanpakuto Oh-Etsu Nemaya, and Tegol Biddy Orihime, whose stupid ass got tricked by Kisuke into wearing this splendid outfit. Starting with soul traits, Ichibe gets a permanent minus 16% damage reduction, rounding is always the DM's choice, and at 20th level, his normal attacks get a 16% bonus, so we can already see that he's geared towards tanking and DPS. Oh-Etsu gets a special attack cooldown reduction of 1 round, so he seems to be a special attack specialist, and a damage reduction of 12%, so probably a DPS as well, though maybe not as much a tank. Orihime gets the 1-round special attack cooldown reduction too, which makes sense since she's geared towards her special attacks and their special effects, and she gets a 20% damage buff on her special attacks when at full health. What a shocker for a ranged DPS/healer character. Everyone here only gets 2 flash steps, so nothing special here, moving on. This time, to spice things up and hopefully confuse some of you guys skipping around because I'm evil, I'll be covering all the skills first this time around, then covering both the special attacks and ultimate attacks to close. Since most of these skills and their effects have been previously established, I'll again shotgun through them, just mentioning what they are and what percent. 9th level gives Ichibe and Oh-Etsu an obscene 50% Berserker, with that being a little better for Ichibe than Oh-Etsu, as Oh-Etsu is an almost dedicated normal attacker, whereas Ichibe's closer to a normal and special hybrid attacker and tank. Origami gets a 20% Berserker, as she does need special attack damage, but that isn't her focus. 15th level gives everyone Bruiser, second verse same as the first, Ichibe gets a 20%, Oh-Etsu gets a 40% leaning into his normal attack DPS, and Orihime gets a normal 20%. Diverging from the standard at 17th level once again, Ichibe gets Flurry, leaning more into a normal attack DPS, which is his specialty in his hybridization. Oh-Etsu gets a 40% devastation since his ultimate attack is actually a pretty big part of his kit as well, and Orihime gets a 40% devastation too, which is kinda weird since it's not a focus for her nor does it do anything special, but at least it keeps her ultimate attack viable, so you can't complain. At 18th level, things start to get really interesting, with Ichibe getting immunity to paralysis, a very good immunity to have considering how much of a pain paralysis is, and Ichibe gets Pierce Barrier, which allows his attacks to ignore all bonuses to AC that the targets have, except for bonuses gained from Dexterity or as a result of a Dexterity ability score or modifier increase. Oh-Etsu gets Enhancer, causing a buff that he gives himself and his allies with a special attack to last longer, which is obviously always going to be good, and he gets Flurry to make himself a veritable normal attack DPS monster. To finish off 18th level, Orihime gets Frenzy, a great skill for this special attack-oriented subclass, and Healer, which makes your healing ability heal for 30% more, so a pretty significant margin of healing. Rolling on to 20th level, where the heavy hitters go, Ichibei gets Poise to become an immovable tank, and a Start Barrier, giving him 10 shields that reduce damage taken to 0 upon being hit after every long rest, one of the best skills one can get, especially for a tank like Ichibei. Oh-Etsu gets immunity to paralysis like Ichibei earlier, but leans more into attack rather than tanking with Guard Break, a skill that allows you to bypass AC bonuses from armor, shields, or magical effects that aim to block attacks, making hitting your targets for immense damage oh so much easier. Orihime gets a good skill for her main focus, healing, with Medic, which applies the heal Orihimes get with their special attacks that we'll talk about later to the entire team, making it a way better support attack, and weaken defense to make that ultimate attack even more worth actually using. For their resurrections, Ichibeis get a 30% bruiser, get Prevent Last Ditch Survival, stopping anyone you kill from resurrecting or preventing that death, and Ignore Invincibility to make sure that you can bypass damage immunities and anything that would prevent you from doing any damage, so not resistances or damage reductions. With that resurrection, Ichibeis are amazing tanks that can basically hit their enemies almost no matter what, and do some significant damage regardless as to how they choose to attack. Oh-Etsu, however, becomes a glass cannon. Like, he's not fragile, but the damage he deals compared to the damage he can take becomes so disproportionate, he might as well be. His bruiser goes up to 80%, he gains immunity to the weaken condition and any damage reduction effect, and he gains poise so that you basically can't stop him. Finally, Orihime gets a 20% Havoc for more special attack range, and Multi-Barrier, which just bumps the shields you get from your special attack from 3 to 5, and the shields your allies get from 1 to 3. She's got good ultimate and special attack damage, but her focus is definitely healing and support. Moving back to 7th level and 14th level for special and ultimate attacks, Ichibei gets Ichimonji. You get weaken on all your attacks except for your special attack 3 due to the ink of your Ichimonji's weakening those it lands on, so ridiculously good for a tank and actually really good as a support as well, since your ink reduces the damage that your whole team takes. You get Senri Tensusho, the big hand Ichibei used on Yuha, as a 50-foot dashing palm strike that deals force damage, the least resisted damage type behind maybe psychic damage, but the 50-foot dash is something to use strategically. Your special attack 2 is a 15-foot wide, 450-foot long line of Ichimonji ink that deals necrotic damage since it makes all the black its power and can attack the opponent from the inside using their own black. And you can use Urohado Sanoto Teppusatsu for a big 200-foot radius force damage AoE attack, but with no weakening effect. Pretty typical kit of dashing attack, line attack, and AoE, but the majority of attacks having the weakening condition is nice, and the range and damage numbers should be acceptable, especially with all the skill boosts. For Oh-Etsu's Sayafushi, it's a little more atypical, as while its first special attack is a 50-foot dash, his special attack 3 is a 200-foot AoE attack, and he can only deal slashing damage with his special attacks. His special attack 2 is a 50-foot radius celebration that deals radiant damage into a self-centered vortex that deals slashing damage and sucks in all creatures within 50 feet of you while active, and it's a buff for attack, AC, and critical threat range for you and all allies within range for the next 3 rounds. That single attack alone is insane, but coupled with his normal attack damage, and you've got a subclass that's the equivalent of a walking shredder. Finally, with Ori, her Shunshin Rika has a 30-foot range radiant damage normal attack, a 50x50 radiant cone in the form of her special attack 1 Santen Keshun, her special attack 3, a 200-foot AoE radiant storm, and best of all, her special attack 2, her Soten Kishun, where she summons a 30-foot barrier, deals radiant damage, gives herself and allies a barrier, 3 for her and 1 for allies, which gets boosted at 20th level, and she heals herself for 20% of her max HP, which both extends to the rest of her party and gets boosted to 50% through medic and healer respectively, making her the ultimate offensive support. For the finishing touches of these subclasses, Futen Taisatsu Ryo for Ichibei, Sayafushi 1 swing 1 kill for Oh-Etsu, and the power to protect hope for Best Girl.
墓標を立てて弔うてやろう。恩師が二度と生まれてこぬよ。 大殺量
For Futen, mechanically it isn't anything too special, just a typical 400-foot AoE and necrotic damage, cause black, but it of course gets that guaranteed 2-round weaken. So a very cool looking attack, haven't seen it in the anime but definitely looking forward to it, that deals a lot of damage and has a practical use. One swing, one kill though, that one's a doozy.
I am number one subclass creator
シャンボクの方の一振り一殺さ
First off, I love his line, I am number one Zanpakuto creator, and hearing that every time. Secondly, as for the attack itself, guaranteed full damage, no dex save to half or evasion shenanigans. And they've got to succeed on a con save or your one swing really will be one kill, because this attack has an insta-kill effect that just takes the coolness factor way up. Lastly,
2対1で卑怯かもしれねえけど頼むぞ井上
Ori's The Power to Protect Hope is pretty basic, but the radiant damage is good of course, and it's gotten some good boosts through skills, but ultimately, her niche is more the barriers and healing more than the damage. Alright, with Founder straightened away, let's jump right over to the rest of Squad Zero with Soul Reaper Quintessence and subclasses Tenjiro Karinji, Kiryu Hikifune, and Senjumaru Shutara. So, as the last set of subclasses with the Resurrection at this point, let's start with their first level and 20th level soul traits. Tenjiro gets a 1-round special Zanpakuto weapon attack cooldown reduction, and a 20% special attack damage boost while at full health at 20th level, so mainly geared towards special attacks with the expectation that you'll be at maximum health beyond the first time you're hit. Kiryu gets a 16% damage reduction to any damage taken, and a 16% normal Zanpakuto weapon attack damage boost, so a weird normal attacking ranged tank? Damage reduction doesn't make sense here since she's a ranged DPS and can heal, but she's supposed to be a PvP character in Bleach Brave Souls, which is an area of the game where damage reduction is invaluable. Lastly, Senjumaru gets the 1-round special Zanpakuto weapon attack cooldown reduction as well, and a 20% damage boost to lacerated enemies at 20th level. So a focus on special attacks and her new status ailment, Lacerate, which is basically Bleed Plus. Tenjiro gets 3 flash steps at 6th level on account of his being lightning fast Tenjiro, master of Shunpo, but everyone else just gets there too. Now we're gonna do 7th level special attacks and 14th level ultimate attacks, and then do skills. Ain't I just a stinker? So for Tenjiro's Soul King's Hot Spring, all of your attacks have a chance to paralyze, so every single Zanpakuto attack from you has the potential to incapacitate the target, cause them to fail all strength and dex saves automatically, causes your whole team to gain advantage on attack rolls against them, and causes anyone to gain crit damage on them at close range. Now that's only for a round, but if you get that para to proc, that'd be a good time for the rest of your teammates to dump on that creature. Like all their fireballs and eldritch blasts and smites and action surges and whatever else. As for his set of special attacks, he's got a 50-foot dash where he gathers up some hot spring water and then slams it down, so a good range dash with a big AoE of like 20 feet on that slam, but it's all acid damage. Wasn't sure if I wanted to do necrotic damage here since the hot spring water melts your soul, but being that it's corrosive in nature, I decided on acid. For attack 2, it's a line attack that deals acid damage, but the range is 10 feet wide and 500 feet long. So you're pretty much going to hit anything you want with this. It's also worth saying that this is a melee attack, not a ranged attack in case that comes up. If you want to check whether something is considered melee or range, a good rule of thumb is that if the subclass has a normal attack included in its special attacks, the normal attack and special attacks are all probably ranged. For specific confirmation, you can look at the Bleach Brave Souls wiki for each character, specifically under the attack tab, where red attacks are melee attacks and blue attacks are ranged attacks. Finally, Tenjiro gets an AoE geyser attack with a smaller range of 100 feet and acid damage, but still gets the para hacks. Not sure what the name of Kiryu's Zanpakuto is, but it looks like a Woke Chuan on release, so her special attack feature is Woke Chuan. Kiryu doesn't have any status ailments on her attacks, but she's more of a raw damage / support subclass, so she's less about conditions and effects and more of a ranged beat stick with a bit of cleric. Her normal Zanpakuto weapon attack does bludgeoning damage, but it does have a range of 30 feet, so you can be a good backline DPS if need be, though you do have damage reduction, so you can fight up close if you want. For her special attack 1, you get a 50-foot wide, 30-foot long wave attack with the roots from the Tree of Life, so a line attack, but it more favors spread than length, catching more enemies in what little range you do have, rather than reaching the next hold with your attack. Special Attack 2 is your only melee attack, but it's the meat and potatoes of your kit. You make and eat a big old bowl of food, become a slim hottie, and deal radiant damage in an AoE of a 50-foot radius around you. The best part of this attack is that not only is it an attack buff, AC buff, and critical threat range buff, but it's also a 20% heal for you. Last for the subclass's special attacks is a big 100-foot AoE attack at a point you can see within 50 feet of you, where you summon a small cage of life that drains the life force of any hostile creature caught inside, dealing necrotic damage. Overall, pretty varied damage types and a great kit for self-sustained damage dealing. For the last of the special attacks, we have Senjumaru and her Divine Soldiers. For Lacerate, with each of your attacks except for your Special Attack 2, you can inflict this effect which causes the creature to take a d6 of non-type damage at the end of their turn, and be unable to use any features or abilities. The last part being the part that separates it from normal bleed effects. The first special attack is a 50-foot wide, 500-foot long line attack where you basically send out a squadron of Divine Soldiers that attack anyone in that range for piercing damage. I typically don't mention the damage the attack deals because it's pretty much the same across the board, but it's all displayed on screen, so you all know that it's the usual 3 to 4 d6 that goes up to d8 and d10 as you level up. Just thought that warranted saying. Special Attack 2 is the only one that doesn't have a chance to proc Lacerate, but it's a special attack, so it's still a good part of the kit. Attack-wise, it's just a 30-foot AoE bludgeoning damage attack as you attack with your threads and cloth you've knit and sewn together, so nothing special, but it's also a barrier attack, with the cloths acting as a shield to protect you and your allies. In that regard, it's the typical 3 shields on you, 1 on each ally in range deal, but it definitely helps to bulk up the subclass mechanically and makes it more interesting as well as more like the actual character of Senjumaru Shutara from Bleach, as she is famous for her threads and cloths, those being what elevated her to Squad 0 in the first place. Finally, you can summon a Shield of the Soul King, one of the big Divine Soldiers, to do a big stomping attack and do bludgeoning AoE damage over 200 feet around you, so her piercing and bludgeoning being her only damage types can be an issue for resistances and immunities early on, but Lacerate definitely helps, and her shields help her stay in the fight even against those who resist her damage types. Also, of course, unless stated otherwise, all conditions these subclasses inflict with their features, Lacerate included, only last one round. Now we've arrived at ultimate attacks, starting with Tenjiro's Heavenly Flash, Kinpika. Of course, you get your 400-foot range AoE, and it does acid damage, as while the name and animation from the move suggest that it's an attack from Kinpika, Tenjiro's released Zanpakuto, we didn't know what it did at the time, as in the manga, the fight is cut away from there, resuming in the aftermath, so the description of the attack claims that the move is an attack with the hot spring water, which does acid damage for this subclass, but there are some interesting benefits for this attack as well. First, a guaranteed 2-round paralyze, so yay, but also, since Tenjiro can heal and even revive people with the hot spring water, that's what this attack does. Similarly to Nemu's Gikan Jirinju, you and your allies within range get that last-ditch effort survival effect, where if you would die, you don't and get the benefits of a long rest, so incredibly useful as always. That effect also lasts until the end of the current combat encounter, which I guess would be dictated by your dungeon master. Kirio's Cage of Life is a little less interesting, just a bigger version of her third special attack. So for the attack's duration, you go back to being a slim hottie or hunk, and you get a big ol' 400-foot AoE of necrotic damage. But that's the long and short of it. For our last attack feature before covering their skills and moving on to our first Sternritter class variant, aptly named the Sternritter, we have Senjumaru's Bad Habits ultimate attack. It's a 400-foot AoE of piercing damage, shocker, but you get those guaranteed 2 rounds of Lacerate, so it's a fantastic addition to our move pool. Now, to rattle off their skills, we've got some interesting ones here. Kirio and Senjumaru get the typical 20% Berserker, with it being a little more useful for Senjumaru, but at least keeping Kiryo's special attacks relevant in terms of damage. But Tenjiro gets something called Speed Attribute Soul Reaper Strong Attack Damage, where, specifically, you and any allies within 30 feet of you that are also the Soul Reaper class and have Dex as their highest ability score get a 20% special attack damage boost. So that skill, as unique and interesting as it is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, if you have anyone else in your party playing Soul Reaper, and they have Dex as their main stat, they get a 20% boost on special attacks along with you. But the downside is that 1, they've got to be playing this one specific Homebrew class, and 2, since there's no attribute equivalent in D&D and ability scores were the closest thing I could think of, if you don't have Dexterity as your highest ability score, or at least tied as your highest, you don't even benefit from your own skill, let alone any buddies you've talked into also playing the Soul Reaper class. 15th level's a bit more streamlined, with Tenji getting his Berserker, another 20%, and the other 2 subclasses getting Bruiser, both 20%. At 17th level, Tenjiro's catch up with their own 20% Bruiser, Kiryo's get Enhancer to make their special attack 2 buff last 2 rounds longer, and Senjumaru's get a 40% damage boost to lacerated enemies. So proccing Lacerate becomes even more worth it aside from its already great effect. 18th level sees both the Tenjiro subclass and the Senjumaru subclass gain Debilitator for an additional round of paralysis and laceration respectively. Tenjiro's get a 40% devastation for a bigger impact on their ultimate attack, giving it a use beyond a bit of damage in the last-ditch survival effect. Kiryo's get Flurry to double their normal attack damage, honing their normal attack damage DPS niche, and Healer to bump their heal to a 50% heal, and Senjumaru's get Frenzy to double their special attack damage as to make her a double threat for laceration and just the initial damage. Finally, at 20th level, Tenjiro's get Frenzy as well, so he too can deal some pretty significant damage with his special attacks, and a 20% Havoc to make up for that only 100-foot AoE third special attack. Kiryo gets Medic, so her 50% heal extends to her entire party within 30 feet of her, and Poise, another holdover from her being a PvP character in BBS, but useful enough if somebody's able to close the distance on her. Last but not least, Senjumaru gets a 20% Havoc as well, increasing her already sufficient special attack range, and increased status ailment chance, reducing saving throws against her Lacerate effect by 4, making it easier to proc Lacerate and get that 40% damage boost. To close on Quintessence, reaching our halfway point of the video, we have our resurrections. Tenjiro's Berserker jumps to 30%, which makes sense since he's mainly a special attacker, but he also gets a 30% special attack boost at full health. Like, the special attack part makes sense, but why full health? Is it because he has paralysis? It's probably because of his last-ditch survival effect, but it doesn't really hit the same without a last-ditch survival skill as well, but maybe I'm tripping. He also gets another ability score boost skill, where anyone with Dex as their highest score, ties count, gets a 20% movement speed increase. Kinda strange, but at least it can apply to anybody using any class, and it kinda plays on Tenjiro's being so damn fast, so sure. Kiryo's Bruiser jumps to 50%, getting her that normal attack niche she's kind of built around, immunity to paralysis along with Ichibei and Oh-Etsu from the Founders set, and she gets a nice 50% damage boost to enemies with no status conditions like Nemu did. Which I personally like, as 1, she doesn't inflict any status ailments so it's internally consistent, and 2, all enemies start without status ailments, so she starts off strong and stays strong if nothing changes. Senjumaru's Berserker increases to 30%, which is great because 20% is honestly a little mid. She gets a 20% damage boost at full health, also great for a barrier character. And speaking of her barrier, she gets multi-barrier, bumping up everyone's barriers by +2, allowing for what is basically her damage immunity to last a little bit longer, hopefully long enough for her shield to recharge so she can keep that full health 20% damage boost. Now, at the halfway point, none of the subclasses proceeding forward will have 2 soul trait skills or any resurrection skills, but these characters are still pretty strong and also incredibly cool. Case in point, we're starting with our second ever Sternritter class variant, which has Bleach JoJo character, the death-dealing Askin Nak everyone's favorite waifu, the Explode Bambietta Basterbine, and Lightning Baddie Quincy Edition, the Thunderbolt, Candace, Catnip as its subclasses. Soul traits are pretty simple. Askin gets a 16% damage reduction since he's supposed to be a tank, and Bambi and Candace get a 1-round special attack cooldown reduction since they're supposed to be ranged and melee DPS respectively, with a focus on special attacks. Candace gets 3 Hirin Kyaku per bonus action, as to be expected with the lightning-themed character with lightning mobility options like Lightning Jump, whereas the other 2 just have the 2. At 7th level, everyone gets their Shrifts, their Volstandigs, and more importantly, their special attacks. Askin gets the D, Stoppage, shut up. Askin gets the D, Volsterndig, where all of his attacks except, you guessed it, Special Attack 2, BBS's favorite super special attack slot, gain a chance to poison the target, which makes sense since poison's his gimmick, and he gets his kit. His move pool consists of a 15-foot by 425-foot line attack that deals poison damage, a highly resisted and even immune damage, but it's got great range and is a melee attack even though you're potentially attacking from nearly 500 feet away. The move pool also has this gem, Special Attack 2, where you can conjure up a Gift Bereich, a special ball that Askin can make that is inescapable. It ain't actually inescapable in this subclass, but it is a big ol' 120-foot radius area where enemies take poison damage and get a debuff. Not just weaken or something, but the reverse opposite of the typical buff. Enemies take a 7-point hit to their attack rolls in AC, and literally just can't crit. This also lasts for 2 rounds as opposed to the typical 1 round for status effects, so this is a great way to turn a boss into a or something. Last for Askin, you get Gift Bad, which mechanically just amounts to a 200-foot area where bad guys inside take poison damage, more basic stuff. Bambi's the E, Volsterndig, is a little less about cool effects and more about range, damage, and burning with all her attacks, so what you'd expect from a bomb maker. She has a 30-foot ranged fire damage normal attack, and yeah, fire damage is easily resisted, but also has some interesting and useful interactions like against trolls, or maybe igniting something, or producing light, or whatever else. She also has, for her first special attack, a 50-foot wide, 100-foot long line of explosions that ends with a 150-foot radius explosion. Like I said, she has exceptional coverage, and there's no concern for her hitting any friendly creatures. If you think her first special attack is difficult to dodge or get out of the way of, just get this. Special Attack 2 is a 200-foot radius bombardment at a point you choose within 50 feet of you. 200 feet, and that's Special Attack 2. Unfortunately, it doesn't really get any bigger than that for Special Attack 3, but still, Special Attack 3 is also 200 feet, and even if they have 2 flash steps or Hirin Kyaku, and use their action to dash, enemies would barely be able to make it outside of that range as you just start erupting with your Special Attack 3 like a volcano. Candace, with the T, Volsterndig, is very similar, just close range, and she paralyzes on all her attacks. For Special Attack 1, we return to form with a dash, particularly a 100-foot dash using her lightning swords that deals lightning damage like all of her attacks. For her Special Attack 2, she tosses out a Galvano Javelin to a point she can see within 50 feet of her that causes a whopping 200-foot radius lightning explosion, similarly to Bambi's SA2. Last, she gets an omnidirectional lightning strike barrage, where she calls down 6 lightning bolts around her, dealing damage to all enemies within 200 feet, which ironically does less damage than one single 8d6 lightning bolt until 13th level, at which point these 6 lightning bolts do just a smidge more damage. 9th level nets all 3 subclasses of Berserker special attack damage boost, 40% for Askin, 20% for the rest. After at 14th level, we get our ultimate attacks, unlocking the true power of our Shrifts and Volstandigs, with the death dealing, the explode, and the thunderbolt.
Gift Bereich からは絶対脱出不可能だ。Gift Ring!
For Askin, you guys will pop up a 400-foot Gift Bereich and gift ring every enemy inside, either killing them on a failed con save or dealing 5d10 necrotic damage via literally killing a part of them. Also, poisoned for 2 rounds even if they survive.
全部まとめてぶっ壊してやるっての。私の
Bambietta's ultimate attack basically turns her into a rolling thunder kill streak from Black Ops, combined with the Modern Warfare tactical nuke kill streak for range, but mechanically it's the same old 400-foot range, and hers is burned for 2 rounds. Last for this batch of ultimate attacks is the Thunderbolt, its 2-round paralysis, and its 400-foot range and damage, all courtesy of Candace's special technique, Electrocution. Quickly finishing off their skills, Askin gets a 30% bruiser at 15th level, where Bambi and Candace get a 20%, and at 17th level, Askin gets Flurry, so Askin's in the lead with raw damage but has crappy poison. But Bambi has great range and now gets damage to burning enemies to help her with damage, specifically a 20% boost, and Candace gets Debilitator for another round of that sweet, sweet paralysis. At 18th level, Askin gets some of his in-canon buffs from the death dealing in the form of immunity to poison and paralysis, so that's fantastic. You love to see both lore-accurate stuff and also conditional immunities. Bambi gets Debilitator herself, which is great for damage output with that damage boost on burned enemies, and she gets a 40% Devastation to make her ultimate attack a nuclear bomb of damage, and Candace gets a 40% Devastation as well, and Frenzy so that she's not completely outstripped in the DPS department. To bring our Sternritter subclasses to a close, Askin gets Poise and Start Barrier to become the unstoppable, unkillable tank with several conditional immunities he was always meant to be. Bambi gets Frenzy and Havoc, like I said, her deal is damage and coverage. And Candace gets Havoc, okay, that adds up, and Weakened Defense. Huh, well, it's good that she's got Devastation to match this, and Electrocution is supposed to be a big deal lore-wise, but that final skill was, well, just a bit shocking, is all. Alright folks, bottom of the 9th here. Just writing this script has taken me 3 days. I'm sorry in advance for recording audio, Christian. Next is Sternritter Separations, where we have Uryu Ishida, the only 1000-year Blood War character from the pre-anime batches I don't have, Jugrim Hashwalth, the god of PvP that I strongly urge you not to use to his fullest extent because D&D is a cooperative game, and we got Bazby, who's just kinda Fire Renji. Alright, everyone gets 2 Hurin Kyaku. Uryu and Bazby gain a 1-round cooldown reduction for their special attacks for their soul trait, and Jugrim gets a 16% damage reduction. Now, let's knock out those special attacks. Uryu's the A doesn't have any ailments and only deals piercing damage, but he does have a 30-foot range normal attack with his bow, a 150-foot wide by 70-foot long arrow wave for special attack, a 150-foot radius vortex of Licht Regen to suck in enemies into one spot and deal some damage, and follow up with a big ol' 140-foot wide, 100-foot long arrow shot that deals some more damage to the vortexed enemies, or the ones that manage to avoid it, and a big ol' Licht Regen to wipe out everything in 200 feet. Jugrim's the B has a melee energy blast that has a range of 15 feet in width and 500 feet in length, talk about a reach attack, a 120-foot dash, the furthest one yet, and a typical 200-foot AoE as Jugrim stabs his Seirin into the ground. Also, Jugrim has weaken on all of his attacks, so his good coverage can definitely help to weaken droves of enemies at once. And Jugrim's got some decent damage type coverage as well, dealing bludgeoning, either bludgeoning or piercing, and radiant damage with his special attacks respectively. For my main man Bazbian is the H. He obviously burns on hit, but he's got a 100-foot dashing Fire Claw attack with his Burner Finger 2, a 200-foot AoE in Burner Finger 3, and our first charge attack in a while, hence my comparison to Renji, with Burner Finger 4, which is either a 200-foot AoE 4d6 burn damage special attack 3, or with a round of charge, a 250-foot AoE 8d6 napalm carpet bombing run. Uryu's ultimate attack, his The Antithesis, is his most interesting attack, with it having the normal 400-foot AoE, but it does non-type damage since it damages the enemy via reversing causality, and it heals you and all allies nearby for 60% of your health.
私のシュリフトは B、ザ・バランス。 我が身の不運はさらなる不運としてお前に降り注ぐ。
The balance is a little more basic in that there's no special heal or effect or anything, but it does do a guaranteed round of weaken, and it also does non-type damage via attacking through causality instead of attacking.
そんなに俺に負けるのが光栄かよ。バーニングフルフィンガー。
Bazby's unfortunately the odd man out here, as his The Heat just does fire damage over a 400-foot AoE and guarantees a round of burning with burning full fingers, which is still a pretty good ultimate attack, just not very unique. You'll come to find shortly that, while Uryu and Jugrim have their niche, Bazby just wants to deal as much damage and inflict as much burn as possible. Skills will tell you everything you need to know about each subclass's niche. Uryu's ailment reversal allows him to reflect any condition he's affected with back onto the afflictor and instead heal 2d2 hit points, whereas Jugo gets a dumpy 50% berserker and Baz gets a 20% berserker. With just that snapshot, you'd probably guess that Uryu's niche is anti-condition, and Jugo's just a better beatstick than Baz, but just wait until you've got the full picture. At 15th level, Uryu catches up with the other two subclasses with a 40% berserker. Jugrim starts getting into his specialty with Counter, a skill that allows you to use Frianshal to reflect 20% of any damage you would take from a player character only back to the attacker. Damage you would take is specific wording, remember that for later. And Baz gets a 20% bruiser, so he's staying with damage output instead of anything fancy. At 17th level, Uryu gets himself a 40% bruiser, so his damage output is starting to look good. Jugrim gets temporary invincibility to absorb any damage he takes from a player character, making him invincible for the first 2 rounds of combat against a player character only. Counter still applies here because it's not damage he takes, but would take. And Bazby gets Debilitator for a round of more burn. So Uryu's got Antithesis and is climbing with damage, Jugo's got his The Balance now, and Baz is up on damage and burn. This is pretty much what they're built for, so keep that in mind when choosing a subclass. Specifically how Jugo's really only good against player characters with his The Balance skills. 18th level pretty much rounds out damage output for everyone. Uryu and Baz get a 40% Devastation, Uryu and Baz also get Frenzy, Jugrim gets a 20% Bruiser finally, and Jugrim also gets Flurry. Lastly, 20th level gets the Separation Sternritter subclasses their last little flourishes. Uryu gets Guard Break so as to give his good offense a greater chance to land, Havoc to give him more range, especially on that Vortex he's got, Jugrim gets Pierce Barrier to make sure that even if you can't hurt him, he can hurt you, and Poise to have the closest thing he's going to get to invincibility against normal creatures, and Baz gets Havoc to help with his special attack 3's weak range, and increase status ailment chance for a better chance to burn his targets via making it harder for them to succeed on the save. Now ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our last set of subclasses. This one's going to be a little complicated since one subclass is for a Soul Reaper variant class, whereas the other two are for a Sternritter variant class, but if you're paying attention you should be fine. So starting with Flash Steps and Hirin Kyaku quickly, Nanao gets 2 Flash Steps at 6th level, Gremmy gets 2 Hirin Kyaku at 6th level, and Lile gets 2 Hirin Kyaku, so everyone gets 2 of their 30-foot teleports per bonus action. Jumping back to Soul Traits at 1st level, Nanao, the Keto expert with a bunch of Keto as her special attacks, gets a 1-round special attack cooldown reduction. Shocker. Gremmy and Lile also get 1-round special attack cooldown reduction. So suffice it to say that everyone in Lifelong Desire is a special attacker. Speaking of those special attacks, let's jump to those. So first, before we jump into Nanao's special attacks, it's worth saying that this would be the perfect subclass to be a Keto expert for instead of being a Zanjutsu expert, but if you do choose to be a Keto expert, remember to grab the Keto spells from the original Soul Reaper class on the D&D Homebrew wiki. Alright, for Nanao's high-level Keto feature, she gets paralysis on all of her attacks except for her special attack 2 barrier, so you know we're going for a strong support subclass with a cool special attack too. For this subclass's special attacks, she has Hado number 58 Tenron, a 200-foot wide, 600-foot long hurricane that deals bludgeoning damage. Bludgeoning damage is normally meh here, but it's Keto, so it's magical bludgeoning damage. So that, right from the word go, is better off than some subclasses at this stage, but a 600-foot line of paralysis? That's the real threat. Her unique special attack 2 is when she summons that barrier to block Jugo, which is a 120-foot AoE bludgeoning attack combined with, of course, a shield attack that grants you 3 barriers and your allies 1 each, as well as a buff, so +7 on attack rolls and AC, and a 13 crit. Attack, shield, and buff. A really great attack overall with decent range to boot. Last special attack is Bakudo number 79, Kyuyo Shibari. You know, that really cool black hole Bakudo that Kisuke used on Aizen at the end of the fake Karakura Town arc, which in this case has the normal 200-foot range and does force damage since it's literally 6 mini black holes holding you in place. And I imagine that, even if it's a Bakudo meant to seal you rather than damage you, if you ain't Aizen, that's gonna hurt. As for Gremmy and Lille on the Sternritter side of things, Gremmy gets the V, and Lille gets the X, naturally. For Gremmy's the V, you not only get burn on all of your attacks except for your special attack 2, which inflicts Lacerate, but you also get a ranged normal attack since all 3 subclasses for this batch, Nanao, Gremmy, and Lille, are all ranged attackers, with the only melee attack out of all of their kits being Nanao's shield attack. Gremmy's normal attack is him throwing lava at any creature within 30 feet and burning them. Let me know in the comments if you guys prefer the standardized 30-foot normal attack range, or the unique ranges like Mayuri had. His special attack 1 is his summoning a 250-foot wide firing line of guns and missile launchers to fire 50 feet out and deal fire damage. His special attack 2 is when he tried to trap Kenpachi in that cube of water and tried to crush him with the stone pillars. It's got an AoE of 250 feet because it's a big water cube and 4 big pillars, and it deals bludgeoning damage cause crush and lacerate for some reason. And his special attack 3 is his creating a clone and conjuring a massive meteor to crash into Earth and wipe out everything, dealing fire damage since the meteor is ablated to all hostile creatures within 200 feet. Lille's the X doesn't give him any status conditions he can inflict, but seeing as his spirit weapon, Diagram, is a sniper rifle, it deals piercing damage and has a range of 300 feet. His special attacks are pretty basic, as you'd expect, just different ways of using Diagram. His first special attack has him firing a 20-foot wide, 600-foot long line, so another 600-foot range attack, though it's a little more thematic here since it's double the range of his normal attack, so it's just like some supercharged shot. And of course, Dog's using a sniper. For his special attack 2, you can jump up and fire down a barrage of shots in a 200-foot radius. And for his special attack 3, you basically just shoot any enemy within 200 feet of you, which I chalk up to faster firing equaling shorter effective range. At 9th level for the trio, Lille gets a 40% Berserker since he's all about that big damage, Gremmy gets the standard 20% Berserker, and Nanao gets a 20% Berserker as well, since they both have conditions and special effects on their attacks, and Lille doesn't. Speaking of special effects on attacks, Nanao's ultimate attack is the same run-of-the-mill 400 feet, but it does radiant damage and guarantees the 2-round paralysis. It's also her one and only Zanpakuto attack, for whatever that's worth to you. Gremmy's the Visionary is definitely the most interesting of the bunch, as he also gets the 400 feet, but deals non-type damage since the damage comes from the vacuum of space, and it gives you and all your allies last-ditch survival. So we eatin' good tonight, ain't nobody dying on your team now. The X-axis isn't all that special mechanically, but it is cool that you can use your Volsterndig Zilliel, and I'd like it if they made a second form Lille in the future with PvE invincibility. Right after that, at 15th level, everyone gets a 20% Bruiser, Nanao gets a 1-round Debilitator for more paralysis, Gremmy gains immunity to all status ailments like Mayuri, as he can just imagine that effects don't affect him, and Lille gets a 60% Devastation, which makes sense since an attack from Volsterndig should have some oomph in its impact. Lille gets Frenzy for more damage because, like I said, he's the DPS specialist, and Guard Break, because of course a guy whose power it is to bypass defense and obstacles can circumvent defenses. Gremmy gets Debilitator for his fire and laceration, and a 40% devastation, as he does already get the team last ditch effect, so it can't be too high of a boost, but he is throwing you into the vacuum of space. And it now gets Enhancer to make her buff last longer, of course, that's almost guaranteed at this point. And she also gets a 40% devastation since her family's on Pakto. Shinken Hakyoken is literally made to slay gods. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, the true and last finally of the video, Nanao gets Frenzy and Havoc at 20th level for more special attack damage and range. Gremmy also gets Frenzy and Havoc for the same reasons. And Lille closes us off with Havoc for even more range on those sniper special attacks. And our last special skill, Hit Hidden Enemies, which allows Lille to attack hidden enemies and enemies behind cover and obstacles for obvious reasons. Alright people, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and the subclasses. Be sure to grab them up for yourself from the Google Drive below if you'd like to play them yourselves. I'll be doing one more batch of Bleach characters next time to bring my Bleach coverage to a close for a while, so be sure to vote on the poll I'm putting up for what comes after. Well, I've been Red Fox, the YouTuber, and this has been Dungeons & Dragons Homebrew Builds. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.